Welcome everyone to this Build with Mapbox 2025 session. This is Mapping Diplomacy, Visual Storytelling for Global Impact. I'm Marina. I'll be helping just to host this session in the Q&A. Our speaker today is Paul Franz, who is a special advisor with the Data Visualization and Geospatial Intelligence branch of the International Crisis Group. Just a couple reminders for me before we get started. This session is being recorded, so you'll be able to rewatch it in the Zoom events lobby. Encourage other folks to watch it as well. There is Q&A time available in this session. If you would like to submit a question for Paul, please do so in the Q&A box. Also, if you need captions or translations, those are available at the bottom of your screen in the little CC Show Captions button. And that's all the reminders from me. So without further ado, I'll hand things over to Paul.
Thank you, Marina. It's great to see you. And thanks again to you and Chris Wong over at the Mapbox team for having me back. It's always been a nice little tradition, semi-annual tradition, in which I'm talking at these Mapbox conferences. And what a great time to be talking about mapping and geospatial visualization. This presentation is really for my colleagues in NGOs, nonprofits, policy analysis shops, and possibly people who are vendors who provide services and build applications for such clients. But it's an interesting day because it's been 6 years since I did my first public Mapbox presentation in Washington, D.C. 6 years ago, before COVID, it was in person. But when I was preparing for this talk, I really wanted to bring it back up because a lot has changed in those 6 years. Notwithstanding the pandemic, of course, but a lot technologically has changed, and what we're doing with Mapbox GL has really changed and improved. So 6 years ago, I was on a stage. It was in downtown Washington, D.C., and I was talking about how think tanks can make impact in changing policy and influencing policymakers, and how can we inform their decisions better? How do we put out papers and research that make a difference? And so what I argued was that the standard outputs of think tanks for decades had been a static PDF. And I said, for going forward, this is 2019, and certainly before that, we really had to rethink how we were communicating our policy and our research to audiences. And Mapbox and mapping more generally has been one of the most powerful tools that I've been able to deploy at my prior job at CSIS and now at the International Crisis Group in Brussels. So back then, I had ran into a new stack of technologies that basically allowed a user or an editor to create map video, full motion video, using nothing more than a Mapbox base map and a plugin for Adobe After Effects called GeoLayers. And this is what I said back in 2019. This is word for word the exact same thing. And some of these things have still held true, but not all of them. And we'll get into what we're working on now with Mapbox GL at Crisis Group in a minute. But the major takeaways of this, of course, were, one, they're telling a story. A lot of the maps that I've seen and published by policy shops and other think tanks has been nothing more than information overload. Let's just cram as much information into one application as possible. It turns people off, it doesn't get new users in, it doesn't get them engaged. The other nice benefit of when I was doing this full motion video work was that you didn't really need a development skill set. I had been a video editor and a journalist for many years before I got more into multimedia and producing visuals for policy communication. But this was a native mode for me. I didn't need to learn a ton of code. I was able to create really cool visual products using video editors alone. And of course, if anybody is in a government sphere here, the low hardware requirements were really beneficial. I had once presented something to an executive council in a government building many years ago, and I was asked at one point whether I could put a website on a CD. Well, fortunately, with full motion video, that's easily put on a CD. And that was just because of security requirements. And if anybody is in the federal government, you'll know how difficult it is to show external content in a SCIF. But the overarching takeaway, though, of all of this, and the reason why I work in mapping and using visuals to communicate policy is because of this. Think tanks have an attention getting problem. Sure, we have audiences who are not having as long as an attention span, but I think that's a little overblown. I think think tanks, especially with the import of their work and how it can change the world for the better, we need to go where people are, and we need to create really cool stuff that's engaging. And to be sure, maps are everywhere, and politicians are using maps. Here are just two recent examples. You have President Macron of France on the left showing a map of the Ukrainian war, and then you have President Trump of the United States showing his plans to rename the Gulf of Mexico. But again, powerful visuals, they're maps, they're universal. They can talk to people very easily without any misunderstandings. But a funny thing happened in the past couple of years. One is the tool set for Mapbox GL has greatly expanded. I mean, we look back just to 2022. That's when the Mapbox team released their global projections. And I was fortunate to be on a few sessions earlier in the week and hearing about Greg Banneker saying, the future of maps is 3D and immersion. We couldn't agree more. And what you're seeing here on the screen is a Scrollytelling piece that we built at Crisis Group talking about the transatlantic drug trade. And this is a elegant interactive. It's built entirely with Mapbox GL and JavaScript. And to be sure, full motion video is one tool, but we are really starting to see a lot of snowballing with these types of products. And you can see, as I compare some of the work that I've done 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and even today, the amount of cool transitions, animations, 3D effects that we can do in Mapbox right now is nothing like when I first started using it back in 2015. And you can see here, this is a really excellent explainer in which we explained and showed what was going on in the Red Sea with the Houthis striking in Yemen, commercial shipping and military vessels. And I'm just going to pop out of this and then show you what this actually looks like. It's called Scrollytelling for a reason. The only direction in which you can access this story is scrolling your mouse wheel, or if you're on a phone or a tablet, just going up. And as you can see here, all of this is being animated in real time. It's very performant. And we can show nice little effects like this in which there are pulsating dots calling attention to certain flashpoints in the Red Sea. One thing that was really fun was being able to integrate full motion video into the Scrolly itself. And then using myriad different ways, choropleth in this case, showing where militant groups exist in Yemen as of the time of when we published. So I want to revise my earlier guidance that I put out in 2019. Like I said, full motion video is still really important. We're still making map videos using an Adobe workflow, but a lot of things have changed to make these kinds of Scrollytelling experiences more viable, easier to produce and develop. Again, the lodestar here is the ability to tell a story. You can see very clear points that are easily understood in short bites. Taken all together, it weaves a very rich narrative, and it's impossible to misunderstand. But I think I wasn't able to join the LLM sessions earlier this week, but I have to say LLMs have been a game changer in this environment. I don't know how many people on this webinar are from an NGO background, but as you might know, resourcing is scarce. And you don't have the luxury of full-blown development teams at the ready to be able to create apps like this, single-page applications like this. And so it's really interesting to me because I read an interview with Gabe Newell, who is the CEO of Valve software, saying that LLMs are really a scaffold, and it's kind of a cheat code for the people who have the will and the drive to be able to leverage it to create applications like this. Now, honestly, I'm not a coder by trade. Like I said, I started my career as a writer in journalism and then moved on to video production. And for me, being able to use this gives me the ability to rapidly deploy, rapidly prototype these interactive products. And indeed, over the past just 4 years, since 2021, we've had the globe projection introduced with Mapbox GL, fill extrusions, and many more features that have made developing these kind of rich visual narratives that much easier. But we like to share our code. We are very open about sharing our research, of course. Our research is available at crisisgroup.org, but also the code that we're using to build these applications. That's out there in the public domain. And it's all based off of an initial template that the Mapbox team has graciously offered publicly called the Storytelling Library. That's the second link that you see on this screen. And indeed, if you look at these products that I'm showing you here, they're derivatives of that Scrollytelling template, that storytelling template. All that said, our mapping storytelling toolkit is expansive. And in addition to showing these visualizations, a lot of what we do at Crisis Group involves satellite imagery analysis. Here's a before and after of the floods in Derna, Libya last year. We're creating these full motion videos, as I've said, using our Mapbox satellite base layer. We've also done 3D visualizations of important buildings like the United Nations here in New York using the Mapbox data sets. And of course, like I said, we're still using full motion video. Please, our video editor at Crisis Group will kill me if I don't mention it. Please subscribe to us, youtube.com/Crisis Group. You can check out our mapping video series called Mapping Conflict. And so that's pretty much it. I'm happy to take questions and talk more about methods. It's definitely been a journey. Our team at Crisis Group for these interactive applications is really just two. I am more of the engineering part of the equation. My colleague Claire Bocon-Gibaud is our designer who makes these products look really visually impressive. Please follow us at Crisis Group on Blue Sky and Twitter. But also, if you want to stay in touch and talk about mapping ideas or how you can tell mapping stories like the way that we're doing right now, follow me on Blue Sky or LinkedIn. So Marina, I think it's back off to you, but I'm happy to field any questions.
Of course. Thank you, Paul. Thank you for your reflections over 6 years. It's wild to think what's changed over that time. And I love your comment that the globe has only been out for 3 years. Sometimes we forget how fast things are moving. We do have some questions in the chat, and please, folks who are tuning in live, go ahead and use the Q&A box to submit additional questions. But we'll get started with the ones that are in here. So. You make the point that maps can tell a story, but so much still hangs on the creators of the story to craft a compelling narrative. Can you tell more about your process working with story writers and the designers and the developers? Is there interplay between the geospatial data and how the story is crafted?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I don't know if the question asker can follow up with what they do or what industry that they're in, but I'll say it this way. Listen, if you're in a think tank or in a policy shop and you're looking to improve your communications, this cannot be a waterfall process in which the research happens in a silo and then it's just handed off to us, the development team, at the very tail end of that process. There needs to be a synthesis. It needs to be an agile workflow in which the communication between the researchers, or as you say, the story writers, is often early and constant, because what happens is that the researchers, if they operate in a silo and they are not talking to the technical experts, me and my partner Claire, they don't know what they don't know. And it's important for them at whatever turn in or part of their journey, their research journey is, to know that, oh, hey, there might be an opportunity, for instance, to map what you're saying instead of writing 3 pages about it, right? We just put out a interactive map showing all the linkages and connections of infrastructure in the Caucasus region. You could write a lot about it. You could just republish the really poorly drawn government maps. But in our case, because we have knowledge of using OSM, using Overpass Turbo to extract the geometry and knowing what is available in the Mapbox Streets data set, we were able to put together a very highly accurate map of the highways, the pipelines, the railways that the researcher didn't even know was possible because they didn't know the data existed. But had they came to us at the very last moment of that, we wouldn't have had time to produce something that detailed. But because they came to us a bit early, we were able to do our research and then show the efforts of that research, work with those story writers, refine, and then produce. But the key word here, synthesis. You have to be of one mind. You cannot silo out your different disciplines on these teams. And over time, again, not to belabor the point, but over time, if the more those researchers and story writers work with you, the more they know and the more they learn. So you're working towards a better product in the end.
Yeah, it sounds like a very shared creative process.
Has to be.
We've got kind of maybe a related question here, but the question asker says, the presentation seems to prefer maps in the scrolling map format. Why do you find that format more effective than, say, a more standard full map where users explore data points on their own? Might it be related to coming from a video background versus a GIS background?
Yeah. I do have a little bias. That's just kind of where I come from in terms of storytelling. But to be sure, we do both. We don't only do Scrollytelling, although they are our flagship products. And I will say that one of the really cool things that happened this year, and it was the first time I've ever had this happen, was that the Scrollytelling of that Red Sea explainer I showed you eclipsed the number of views for the print report by 70%. Which I was really happy about. I hadn't seen such a discrepancy between the original publishing of a report and then like the auxiliary, like visual component of it do much better, right? But no, if you go to crisisgroup.org, we publish one-off maps that are just contained in a frame where it's more exploratory. I think for any of these situations, it's always about context, right? What are we trying to do here? What do we want the user to be able to take away from the map? And, in the case of these explainers, we want them to be able to easily understand what's happening. But there have been cases, just like the one I mentioned about the Caucasus region, we wanted to just show how there was such, this cross-pollination of different infrastructure across the Caucasus, showing all that infrastructure. And that was just a all-in-one frame map. There was no scrolling involved. So it's context dependent. It's like, what do we want to do? What do we want to achieve? And who's the audience? And that determines what we produce.
Yeah, and maybe another related question on that final point there. So this question is curious about accessibility. Do you find the storytelling format is generally more accessible to your audiences, or are there accessibility trade-offs?
In terms of just being able to make sure it gracefully degrades on smaller screens or older computers, that kind of question, that thing. Yeah, it's definitely a concern. International Crisis Group is not it. We're based in the West, but a lot of our coverage has to do with, the Middle East, North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, other regions of the world where broadband isn't as strong as it might be in major capitals, or the hardware that you're on will have problems with the 3D rendering. Listen, we create a lot of content across all different formats. We still create PDFs, right? The PDF isn't going away as much as I would like it to go away. It's still a part and parcel of our outputs. But it's not the end all be all. What we're doing. It is part of a family of products. And we do our best to improve accessibility, performance. I mean, the updates to Mapbox GL have been great. In cases where we know there will be issues like, the main audience is the federal government in the United States, where their security protocols are so stringent that you can't do the advanced 3D rendering. We might bump things down a bit and use something like Leaflet to produce a map. But it's audience dependent. Target audience dependent, I should say.
Mm-hmm. Interesting how you adjust the complexity of the map for those different audiences like that. I think we've got time for one more question, Paul, before we wrap up. So you mentioned in your presentation briefly about using LLMs. Curious to hear more about how you're using LLMs in your process and other tips for folks who are starting out.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you don't know anything about Mapbox GL or like how maps work, LLMs aren't going to be that useful to you. You need to know what you're asking and know what the consequences of what you're asking are about. I'm not saying like any Joe can walk off the street, have no technical knowledge, and then become like a genius map maker using ChatGPT alone. I mean, I think ChatGPT works really well for me to help bridge, and I use this word, scaffold, some of the gaps in my knowledge as a developer to just expedite certain things, like being able to animate a circle as you saw with the Suez Canal and that Red Sea explainer, for instance. I didn't know how to do that right off the bat, but because I was able to ask detailed questions of an LLM, it helped me guide myself through that process. But before you jump into it, it is good to be knowledgeable about the systems that you're working with, even at a high level, and to know how they interplay with each other. Because if you start asking it like bland questions, generic questions, it's not going to steer you in the right direction. It'll probably cause more frustration than reduce it. So knowing how Mapbox GL works, knowing how to self-host an application, the basics of the system itself gives you a huge advantage. And being able to frame your queries in developer-ish language helps you get these effects that you want to do. And where I'm using LLMs mostly to achieve more special effects, the kinds of things that I knew natively how to do with a video editor and After Effects, but now it can help me create these nifty animations and additional features that I never thought would be possible. And to be honest, it's a requirement. I mean, the output that we are putting out at Crisis Group, if we did not have this augmentation, we would not be able to do the quantity that we're doing right now, or the quality for that matter. Mm-hmm. So I am very much a pro LLM person, but use it responsibly, and we'll use the Google slogan of "Don't be evil" with them.
Well, I like how you frame it, Paul, in terms of you use it to guide yourself, right? You're not handing over the reins to the LLM. You're using it to supplement your knowledge and expand your creative scope of what you want to do with the project.
Absolutely, yes.
Fantastic. Well, I have to cut us off for questions now. We've got to run to the next session. Thank you so much, Paul, for making a return appearance. Always great to have you. And we'll have you again before another 6 years go past. We'll get your reflections on LLMs and mapping next year.
2031. Okay. Let's go. I'm excited.
Who knows? Who knows? Thanks so much, Paul. Thank you, everyone.
It's my pleasure. And thanks, everyone.